When it comes to the life of the apostles and disciples of Jesus Christ, it was never easy for them. And when it comes to their deaths, it was anything but peaceful. The history of the deaths of Jesus' apostles, despite their differences, reaches the same conclusion that all have met very tragic and hurtful ends. These stories are as horrific as one can imagine, from crucifixion to stoning and beheading. These apostles really saw the horrible ending of their lives right in front of their own eyes. In this video today, we'll be looking at the deaths of all 12 apostles and how they actually died. So without any further delay, let's get into it. Before we get into any further details, it is very important for us to know that the Bible only recounts 2 apostles' deaths: James, who was executed by Herod Agrippa I in 44 AD, and Judas Iscariot, who committed suicide shortly after Christ's death. The details of 3 of the apostles' deaths, that are John the Beloved, Bartholomew, Simon the Canaanite, remain unknown according to tradition or early historians. The deaths of the other 7 apostles are known via tradition or early Christian historians' works. According to legend and the Bible, 8 of the apostles were martyred. At least 2 of the apostles were crucified, Peter and Andrew. Let's take a look now at how each of these apostles died. Apostle James, the son of Zebedee. Saint James was the first of Jesus' apostles to be killed for his faith, and he is one of only 2 apostles whose death is mentioned in the Bible. He was captured by Herod the Agrippa I, who arrested him and sentenced him to death in order to appease Jewish officials who were outraged by the church's rapid growth. In the year 44, or roughly 11 years after Christ's death, Herod Agrippa I executed James soon before the Passover. We read about his death in Acts 12 verses 1 through 2 that says something like this. Acts chapter 12 verses 1 through 2. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. The Bible tells about James that he was executed with a sword, which likely means that he was beheaded. Apostle Andrew. Georgia, now Russia, Istanbul, which is now Turkey, Macedonia, and lastly Greece, were all places where he preached. Governor Aegiatus was enraged by the apostles' preaching and the conversion of his own family to Christianity in Patras, Greece. He demanded that Andrew forsake his faith in front of a tribunal. When Andrew protested, the governor ordered his crucifixion. Andrew was bound upside down to an X-shaped cross with heavy, tight ropes, but he continued to preach to onlookers. He was able to persuade many people to adopt Christianity soon before he died after 3 days of pain. Parts of his remains are maintained in Constantinople, which is now Turkey, and Scotland, England, but his head is still kept in Patras. Apostle Philip. Apostle Philip was also one of the apostles who preached in Georgia, current Russia, Istanbul, current Turkey, and lastly Greece. Governor Aegiatus was enraged by the apostles' preaching and the conversion of his own family to Christianity. The governor ordered his crucifixion. Most historians believe Philip's execution was particularly harsh. He was pierced in his ankles with iron hooks and hung upside down to die. Little else is known about the procedure, but it is sufficient to understand how he died. Apostle Bartholomew. Bartholomew is also known as Nathaniel, and nothing is known about how he died. But since he was martyred in Armenia, it indicates that he, too, must have been involved in the Great Commission and spreading the good news in the part of the world. He apparently went to Asia Minor as a missionary. Unfortunately, most agree that he was flayed to death by whip, where he was physically ripped to shreds. That must have been excruciating. Apostle Thomas. Again, not much is known about Thomas's execution method, but this could be because he was a missionary in India establishing a church when he was wounded with a spear and died as a result of the wound. We cannot add anything to this story with perfect confidence because there was so little historical data accessible beyond this report. Apostle Simon. Simon was a member of the Zealots before becoming an apostle, a political movement that rebelled against the Roman control of Jerusalem. He is also thought to have preached in the Middle East, North Africa, Egypt, Mauritania, and perhaps the United Kingdom. Scholars and historians argue that Simon was crucified by the Romans in Lincolnshire, Britain, crucified in Samaria, Israel, following a failed insurrection, or saw to death in Suanir, Persia, with Jude Thaddaeus. Apostle Judas, aka Thaddaeus. He worked alongside Simon the Zealot, preaching and converting unbelievers in different areas. Jude is also usually thought to have traveled and preached in Beirut, Lebanon. He also assisted Bartholomew in establishing Christianity in Armenia. His death is unclear since there are two versions. First is that he was crucified in Edessa, Turkey, and second, he was clubbed to death and his body was sawed or chopped in pieces afterwards together with Simon the Zealot. Apostle Matthew. He had to have been an apostle for a long time because he wrote the Gospel of Matthew at least 20 years after Christ's death. In tradition, he preached in Ethiopia, Africa, Judea, modern-day Israel, Macedonia, Syria, and Parthia, northeast Iran. Different Bible scholars have different interpretations on how he died. Some claim he was murdered with a sword in Parthia or died naturally in Ethiopia. Apostle Peter. The death of Peter is widely known among secular and religious historians. He was crucified, but he felt unworthy of the same manner of death as Jesus. Therefore, he asked to be hanged upside down, as was done in Rome. In fact, his death was something that Jesus must have known, as mentioned in John chapter 21, verse 18 through 19. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. Anytime Jesus stated truly, truly, or verily, verily, he was emphasizing a fact, and Jesus must have known with certainty how Peter would die, because the words stretch out your hands and carry you where you do not want to go clearly meant crucifixion. Apostle John. Up until the persecution of Herod Agrippa I, John spent the majority of his time in Jerusalem with Peter. Scholars agree that around this time, John escaped and preached in Asia Minor, the region around Turkey. Years later, academics discovered that he traveled to Rome and was persecuted by other Christians before being thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, where he miraculously escaped. Matthias was the apostle chosen to replace Judas, who committed suicide. Acts chapter 1, verse 20 through 26 explains how this was accomplished, and some scholars believed it fulfilled the prophecy in Psalm chapter 69, verse 25, and Psalm chapter 109, chapter 8. Whether or not the prophecy was about Matthias, he was probably stoned and subsequently beheaded in the late 1st century. Apostle Paul. Paul was the last of the apostles. He wasn't part of the 12, but was selected by the risen Christ to serve as an apostle to the Gentiles. In AD 67, the cruel Emperor Nero tortured and beheaded him in Rome. There is no doubt about the fact that all of these apostles stood firmly to the word of God and now must be in heaven. May God have his mercy upon us all. And that's all about this video today. Share your thoughts on this with us. Hope you enjoyed this detailed story of the deaths of apostles. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.